The scent of pine and damp earth filled the air, a familiar perfume for Ethan. For 30 years, this was his world, a sanctuary of rugged beauty and untamed life. He knew every trail, every hiding spot, and every animal that called this place home. He respected their space, and in return, they respected his. It was a silent, ancient pact. But on this particular Tuesday, that pact was about to be challenged in a way he never imagined. Ethan stopped his truck to check a trail camera. He was about to get back in when he heard a low, guttural growl. He turned slowly, his hand instinctively resting on his belt. A male mountain lion stood at the edge of the forest. It was not a territorial growl, though. It was a sound of distress, a continuous rumble. The mountain lion took a step forward, its eyes fixed on Ethan's truck. Ethan noticed the animal had a deep gash on its right foreleg. It limped, its body language a mixture of fear and desperation. The mountain lion, a phantom of the wilderness, was called a ghost cat for a reason. Rarely seen, almost never approached. Yet here he was, not hiding, not threatening, but pleading. The animal's eyes, usually cold and calculating, were filled with a raw, undeniable pain. Ethan knew this was not aggression. This was a cry for help. Ignoring his training, Ethan slowly raised his hands in a gesture of peace. He spoke in a soft, reassuring voice. "Hey there, fella, I see you. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The mountain lion let out a whimper. It took another hesitant step towards the truck, then stopped, its gaze shifting from Ethan to the passenger seat. Ethan followed the lion's gaze and saw a small, dark shape curled up on the seat. It was a cub, no bigger than a house cat, shivering and whimpering. Ethan looked back at the adult lion, his heart pounding. The desperation in the animal's eyes was overwhelming. The mountain lion nudged the truck's door with its snout, a gesture of silent, profound trust. Ethan's mind raced. This was a directed plea. The adult lion was not just in pain, it was leading him to something or someone in need. He knew the risks. A mountain lion was an apex predator, unpredictable and dangerous, but looking at the fear and sorrow in those amber eyes, Ethan knew he had to do something. He had to trust the animal, just as the animal was trusting him. Ethan slowly reached for the truck door handle. The mountain lion took a step back but did not run. It simply waited, its gaze fixed on him, a silent promise hanging in the cold morning air. Ethan sat at his desk, a worn map of Yellowstone spread out before him. He was on the phone with his supervisor, a tense conversation. "No, I'm not crazy, Frank. The cat was right there outside my truck. He had a gash on his leg and he was showing me something. A cub, Frank. A terrified cub." Frank's voice on the other end was skeptical. "Ethan, you've been out there too long. It was probably just a mama cat protecting a kitten. They get protective. That's what they do. I'm sending a biologist out tomorrow, Sarah Miller. She's new. She'll set up some trail cameras. Just be careful." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. He hung up the phone, frustrated. Just then, a young woman with a determined expression and a notebook in her hand walked into the office. "Ranger Ethan, I'm Sarah Miller, biologist. I heard you had a unique encounter." Ethan looked at her, his skepticism showing. "Yeah, I did," he grunted. "And you're the one Frank thinks is going to solve it with a camera?" Sarah didn't flinch. "Cameras are a good start, but I'm also a big believer in observation. The first-hand kind. Mind if I tag along tomorrow?" A flicker of respect passed through Ethan's eyes. "Be here at dawn, and bring warm clothes. It's going to be a cold one." The next morning, the fog was even thicker. Sarah sat quietly as Ethan drove. The tension was palpable. They reached the spot where the mountain lion had appeared. There were no tracks, no lingering scent. Nothing. The forest had swallowed the evidence whole. "See," Ethan said, a bitter edge to his voice. "Gone. Frank was right. I'm just getting old." "Wait," Sarah said, her eyes scanning the ground. She got out of the truck and knelt down. "Look at this." She pointed to a patch of disturbed earth near a large pine tree. "A trail camera. Old model, and it's been ripped off its mount." Ethan's heart sank. This wasn't a natural occurrence. The mountain lion's injury, the cub, it all pointed to something more sinister. He followed Sarah's gaze to a faint, almost invisible trail of blood leading into the dense brush. They followed it for a few hundred yards until they came across a small, hidden cave. A low growl emanated from within. "That's him," Ethan whispered, "the mountain lion." "And he's protecting something," Sarah added, "or someone." They waited, motionless. The growling subsided, replaced by a soft, whimpering sound. Ethan knew they couldn't stay. They didn't have the right equipment or the manpower for this. This was no longer just a missing cub. It was a crime scene. A line had been crossed. As they turned to head back to the truck, Ethan looked at Sarah. Her face was lit with a fire he hadn't seen in decades. It was the fire of a person who knew they were about to uncover something big, something that mattered. He knew then that she wasn't just a biologist, she was a kindred spirit. Back at the ranger station, the mood was somber. The torn-up trail camera and the faint blood trail were enough to convince Frank that Ethan wasn't crazy. They called in for backup, but it would be hours before a full team could arrive. Ethan and Sarah were on their own for the moment. The mountain lion and its cub were in danger, and the illegal poachers were likely still in the area. "We need to go back," Sarah said, her voice firm. "We can't just leave them there." "Frank would have my head," Ethan replied, but his eyes betrayed his words. "We'll go in with tranquilizers and a small team, 2 of us, tops. We'll sedate the adult lion, get the cub, and get out. We'll have to be quick and quiet." "I have a better idea," Sarah said, pulling out a small satellite phone. "We'll call a vet I know, Dr. Anya Sharma. She specializes in large feline rehabilitation. She can meet us there with the right equipment. She's a miracle worker." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Let's do it." With a plan in place, they headed back out into the woods, Dr. Sharma's truck following closely behind. The weather was turning for the worse. A blizzard was on the horizon, but they had to push on. The stakes were too high. As they approached the cave, the blizzard began to howl. The wind whipped through the trees, and the snow fell in thick, heavy sheets. It was a perfect cover for poachers, and a dangerous one for them. Ethan and Sarah moved with silent purpose. Dr. Sharma waited a safe distance away. Inside the cave, they found the mountain lion, weak, but still defiant. It was protecting 2 cubs, not one. A second cub, even smaller and more vulnerable, lay huddled against its mother. The adult lion let out a low growl, but it was a tired, weary sound. Its eyes, filled with pain and exhaustion, pleaded with them one last time. Sarah approached slowly, her hands empty and open. "It's okay, girl," she said softly. "We're here to help." The lion's eyes followed her every move, but it didn't attack. It seemed to understand. Using a tranquilizer gun, Ethan carefully sedated the adult lion. With the help of Dr. Sharma, they examined the gash on its leg. It was a bullet wound. The poachers had shot the lion, but it had managed to escape. Ethan's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about a lost cub anymore. This was a crime, and the perpetrators were still out there. They carefully placed the adult lion on a stretcher and the 2 cubs in a heated cage. The mother lion was weak but stable. She had been protecting her cubs from the poachers, enduring the pain of her wound. The crying king was a mother, a queen who had risked everything for her children. The sight left Ethan and Sarah speechless. The blizzard raged on, but inside the ranger station a different kind of storm was brewing. The discovery of the bullet wound confirmed their fears. They were dealing with dangerous criminals. Ethan and Sarah, now with Dr. Sharma's help, were on a mission. They had to find the poachers before they could harm any more animals. They started by analyzing the bullet from the lion's leg. Dr. Sharma, a skilled forensic vet, identified it as a high-caliber round, one not typically used by legal hunters. This was a professional job, a cold-blooded act of illegal poaching for the black market. "They're after something big," Ethan said, his voice grim. "These guys aren't just looking for a trophy, they're looking for a payday." Sarah, meanwhile, was cross-referencing the trail camera data with recent reports of suspicious activity in the park. She found a pattern. A few weeks ago, a small plane had been reported flying low over a restricted area. The flight path was unusual, and the timing was suspicious. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. "The plane was seen flying over the old logging road," she said, pointing to a spot on the map. "It's a remote area, a perfect place for a rendezvous. They could be dropping off supplies or picking up their haul." Ethan's eyes lit up. He knew that logging road. It was a forgotten part of the park. He and Sarah decided to head there, alone, before the full team arrived. They knew the risks, but they also knew that time was of the essence. As they drove, the snow made the roads treacherous. They pushed on, their determination fueled by the image of the injured mother lion and her cubs. They had a feeling that this was the key to everything. They arrived at the old logging road just as the sun began to set. The sky was a bruised purple, and the snow-covered trees cast long, eerie shadows. The air was still and silent. As they walked, they noticed fresh tire tracks in the snow. They were new and they were big. Poachers. They were here. They followed the tracks to a small, dilapidated hunting cabin nestled deep in the woods. Light spilled from a window, and they could hear the muffled sounds of men talking. Ethan and Sarah crept closer. They looked through the window and saw 3 men, their faces grim and their hands stained with blood. They were cleaning a rifle, their conversation low and menacing. On a table in the corner, they saw a small metal cage, and inside, a terrified grizzly cub, whimpering softly. Ethan's blood ran cold. They weren't just poaching mountain lions. They were after a whole menagerie of animals. They had to act now. Ethan and Sarah, armed with their courage and a satellite phone, knew they couldn't take on 3 armed poachers by themselves. They had to be smart. They called Frank, their supervisor, and gave him their location. He promised to send a team, but it would take time. "We have to create a diversion," Sarah whispered. "Something to draw them out, something to give us an opening to get to that cub." Ethan nodded. He grabbed a small bag of flares from the truck and a bottle of kerosene. He had a plan, a risky, dangerous plan, but it was their only shot. He would create a fire that would get their attention, while Sarah would sneak around the back of the cabin and get the cub. As the blizzard intensified, Ethan set the flares in a small clearing near the cabin. He poured the kerosene over a pile of dry leaves and twigs and lit a match. A small fire began to burn. The men inside the cabin immediately noticed the light and rushed outside, their rifles in hand. "What in the hell is that?" one of the poachers yelled. "Someone's here!" another one shouted. While the poachers were distracted, Sarah moved with the stealth of a phantom. She reached the back of the cabin, found an open window, and slipped inside. The cabin was a mess, filled with animal pelts, poaching gear, and cages. She found the grizzly cub, its eyes wide with fear, and quickly opened the cage. The cub, still terrified, hesitated for a moment, then bolted out the window. Outside, the poachers, now realizing the fire was a diversion, turned their attention back to the cabin, but it was too late. Ethan, now armed with a tranquilizer rifle, stepped out from behind a tree. "Drop your weapons!" he yelled. The poachers, startled, raised their rifles. But just then, the sound of sirens filled the air. Frank and the backup team had arrived. The poachers, cornered, dropped their weapons and surrendered. With the poachers in custody, Ethan and Sarah rushed back to the ranger station, the grizzly cub safely in their truck. The mother mountain lion, now dubbed the Queen, was resting comfortably, her wound healing. Her cubs, now reunited with her, snuggled up against her. The grizzly cub was taken to a wildlife sanctuary. In the end, it was a story of courage, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. Ethan and Sarah, once strangers, had become a team. They had saved not just the mountain lion and the grizzly cub, but the very soul of the park. The crying king's desperate plea had not been in vain. It had been a call to action, a call that had been answered. And in that moment, in the quiet warmth of the ranger station, surrounded by the animals they had saved, they knew that their work was far from over.